Hello. Hi everyone. How are we doing? For those waiting or those about. As always, welcome back to the book club. The live stream we do every 6 weeks where we chat a little bit about the book, but we also just, chat shit, answer some questions and generally hang out for the best part of an hour. So, yeah, welcome. I think today I'm just probably, as always, we're going to just sit for like 5 minutes, let people join, just say hi, maybe let me know where you're from, and yeah, then we'll get stuck into some things. And I said, like, the whole stream isn't going to be about the book. Like, I want to chat about some things in the book, even just answering the first point on the chat, which is about how disappointing and outdated pseudo mythology based science is, which is actually, ironically, if you read the book, they talk about that in there. So, it's a funny one, but I'm going to chat about that one in a bit. It certainly was an interesting one. I'll be honest, I didn't actually finish the book. I'm only like about a third of the way through, just because it was really heavy. Like, I'm not a quick reader. Like, I have got sort of dyslexia, and I'm just very slow at reading, basically. And this was just quite a heavy book. Plus, it's this is the thing. So when I said about that comment that somebody made about, it's disappointing how outdated pseudo and mythology-based science reasoning by analogy has taken over real psychology and popular culture. Like, dude, you can read and experience different ideas without having to agree with them. I don't know. This one always shocks me. Like, I'm always open. I'll listen to anything. I'll read anything. And I'll make my own judgment for that. I wouldn't just like write something off. Like, I'll be honest with you, this isn't necessarily up my street. Like, I thought this would be on the woo woo end of the spectrum when it comes to, like psychology stuff, and it kind of was. It was a little bit on the woo woo side of things, the spiritual versus the rational, right? But to me, that's interesting, and I'm happy to like expose myself to those ideas. Like, I'm not at all religious. I would consider myself a relatively rational individual. But it was, it's good to like, I don't know. I just don't think you can make a judgment on something out of when you just lack the understanding of the thing you're trying to judge, right? Most judgment is due to lack of understanding. But anyway, how's everyone doing today? How's everyone doing on this fine Thursday? Is 5 p.m. in the UK, so I think it's just about morning in the US. Probably some reasonable time in the rest of the world. It seems to work out well. How's everyone doing, and where are you from? Got something from Las Vegas. It's pretty cool. I'm doing quite well. I just had my friend early to stay for a couple of days. We're working on a new coaching project, which is super fun. Planning some things. And apart from that, trying to enjoy what is being the British summer, which is not been very sunny, but let me know where you guys are from, and I don't know if you're gonna hang out. If you let me know if you read the book, it's kind of the point of this one, right? Or attempted to read it. Got James from Scotland. First time I've listened to your book club series. Hopefully it's not the last. As I said, this is a book club, but it's also just like, it's a hangout. That's what it is. It's an hour long. Like, we're just gonna sit and have a chat. I like to read what you guys have to say. Like, sometimes we just get off topic and chat about random things. Eric, how's the shoulder? My shoulder is good. So for those of you who don't know, I had a minor infraspinatus tear on my left shoulder, and I did see a video. I did make a video even. Regarding this, basically talking about how it came from the partial subluxation of the shoulder that I had back in November. It was like some weakness that was then exposed when I got into some heavier stuff. But it's feeling good. I have no pain. I can do most things again. I'm still pretty strong. I'll put a reference into where it's at. Is it super quiet? I mean, I can turn this up if you want. Let me turn that up. Wait a second. Is that better? It's a bit more. Is it a bit louder? Should be a little bit louder. Yeah. So for reference point where I'm at, I can now do like a few chin-ups again without pain, and it feels pretty good. But that's like the last 2 weeks I've been able to do chin-ups again. So yeah, it wasn't great. It was pretty humbling for sure. Got Mehul from India, Bangladesh, Austin, Texas, Minnesota. Is that, by the way, Peach? That's okay. That's louder. I never know that like this mic I could like push over here and like it doesn't pick up. It doesn't pick up anything. It's a right pain. Congrats on reading the entire thing. Heavy, yes. Yeah, it was heavy. Big congrats on reading the entire thing. From France. Do you like Jordan Peterson's work? I hear if you like one, you like the other. See, I don't think like obviously Jordan was very influenced by Jung, but then again, like Jung influenced a lot of psychologists, as far as I'm aware. Like there's many different schools of thought. There's many different opinions in this matter. Like it's a social science at the end of the day. Psychology. It's not the human mind. Although we like to think it's rational, it's not particularly rational. It's very hard to box up and be specific about. So it ends up being a bit of a social science, right? There's lots of different opinions and theories and all this sort of stuff, but that's a good thing. It's the nature of it. Different ways to get to the end result. But in short, I do like Jordan Peterson. I think he's I wouldn't necessarily say I agree with everything he says, but I can certainly see the value that he does provide people. Like there's no sort of denying that he's helped people, and certainly he's ruffled some feathers as well, and some things I disagree with, but you can't. I think it's wrong. Like we generally speaking, like when you look at sort of media coverage of anything these days, it's very much black or white. You have team A versus team B. You have left versus right. There's no like middle ground. People want to be part of a side, and ultimately like life kind of happens in the middle, right? There's always some truth to either side. It's never that black or white. My left ear is enjoying this more. Do you know what? I think you might be right, and I don't know what setting I need to do to make this into into. I know there's a way of making this into like having the left and right audio, but I honestly couldn't tell you what it is, and I'm really sorry. Wait, let me see if I can play out some settings here. Do I want that? It said it should be left and right. It should be a balance. Let's try add 0 there. You know what? I don't know how to do it, and I'm not going to mess things up. But yeah. So actually, this is an interesting point. Somebody else has commented about Jordan Peterson, and like inspired by Carl Jung. I actually found out about Carl Jung. That's like the reason this channel was named Bodyweight Warrior. The warrior is one of the archetypes from Jung's psychology, and it's actually something that I read like 6-7 years ago now. So it's like before the times of Jordan Peterson. And again, like this is the kind of thing where somebody gets linked to somebody, and then everyone makes that assumption that you're linked to that as well. Like there's plenty of different reasons to like something, right? I guess you got your anema under control. Absolutely not, mate. Absolutely not. Out of control. Do you read French literature? The only French literature I've read, I don't know if I have it here. I'll get back to you on that one. I'll find it. I'm pretty sure I have it somewhere. But there was a good book on liberal sciences, which I read. He was a French author. That was quite a good one. I like France, actually. My neighbour is French, and I've chatted a lot to him about sort of France, and I like. There seems like a lot of good stuff over there. A lot of good thinking, obviously. Cool. I mean, should we chat about the book for those that have read the book, or do you want to chat generally about Carl Jung? So, okay, here's a question for you. Would you consider yourself, okay, if we're going to have two ends of the spectrum, we've got like the woo-woo, spiritual, religious, peace and love, man. And then we've got the like rational, modern man, I guess. You know, everything is logical and fits into order. Like, where would you consider yourself on a spectrum? Like, for me, I personally I'm gonna sit, like, I feel like I sit around here. Like, I definitely, if I look at any of my, it's anything that I do generally in life, it'll be more towards the order, the rational sort of side of things. Even when I do training, for example, like, I've struggled getting into something like movement training, for example, you know, like Ido Portal and that sort of stuff, because that requires a little bit more of that that creative, that expression, that sort of free element of thinking and moving and reacting, that I just find it easier to be like, actually, I just want to turn up and have sets and reps to do, like that logical, that more analytical side of things. I think ultimately everyone fits somewhere between the two, but like, I'd be interested to see like where you consider yourself, because I think probably these days most people are going to consider themselves probably on the analytical, the logical side of things, right? Oh, and Dimmy has also asked, after you started reading the Jung, so obviously that this book is about dreams, have you, which I actually didn't necessarily realize when I first started reading it, or when I intended to read it, but I actually very, very rarely have dreams. Like, I very, very rarely remember them. But when I started reading this book, I was like, I'm going to actually keep a dream diary and write down any dreams that I do have, to try and like bring that more to the forefront and really try to, like, you know, I don't know if I believe what's being written, right? But I like to believe at least that I should try and give something a go, considering some people have put their life's work in, you know, into believing this. It's interesting. So I think over here, more towards the modern side, the rational side, being a physicist is anti-woo-woo. I would also put that argument and say, like, being a physicist also, like, when we get into like very, you know, metaphysics, right? There's some element of faith there as well, just as much as there is in believing in some religions. To some extent, the reasoning is different. I'm woo-woo. I love it. That's the only way, like, when I think about these things, I'm like, woo-woo or rational. Woo-woo is the best way to describe what's your opinion on the shadow? So I think what you're referring to here is like Jung or many people who believe in that sort of stem of psychology, that you have like archetypes which kind of describes more broad energies or aspects of human nature or human psyche, and then within that you have like the shadow forms of that, which would be the expressions of that archetype that you wouldn't want to see. But I think it's a really nice way of simply explaining some elements of the psyche. Depends if you find that useful or not. But again, it's like an analytical way of breaking down something that's not particularly analytical, right? Why not a contribute? Kevin says, why not a contribution of both sides? Could religious belief also be in line with rational and modern? I mean, yeah, I would argue that science is modern day religion. I just think, like, okay, I know it's not. Like, there is obviously something more empirical about science, like observing and repeating and all this sort of stuff. But certainly, like, the way sometimes scientific literature or people present things is presented in a religious way. So even if you just look at like the government in the UK anyway, like they keep mentioning the phrase with coronavirus, like, we follow the science, and it's just like in the same way as like you know, you would follow God or follow a religion, and you know, when like, oh, a recent study has said, it's like the same thing as saying like, oh, this, you know, science has an authority higher than you. It's the same sort of thing as like religion was, you know, a few hundred years ago. I know it stemmed differently, but you can see those similarities there, right? I'm just going to read some of the comments a second. That's good. I do actually have some points to make. I did write some notes down and some bits and pieces. So, you know, there's that. Seeing as we were talking about dreams, let's talk about dreams. How many of you guys dream, and do you pay attention to the dreams that you have do you think there's any significance to them? Because usually it has like the significance is to the individual at the end of the day. I've got some funny dreams that I'm going to share with you some of the dreams that I had during the last 6 weeks of reading this, because some of them were just like a bit weird, really. So I did say I wrote them down. Okay. Dreams are a great way to resolve conflict. I've had too many otherworldly experiences to ignore the woo-woo side. The magician, yeah, exactly. 50-50 on dreams. You have the weirdest dreams. Yeah. I actually, so obviously, like I use an aura ring, right? To the analytical side of me wants to understand my sleep, right? And I'm always very good on the deep sleep side of things. I've always got like a couple hours of deep sleep, but REM is usually kind of lacking, which is kind of interesting. And maybe that's why I don't get much sort of dreaming, or I very rarely dream anyway. Not that I remember it. Weird dreams are always fun though. Yeah, I've heard that also with taking zinc supplementation can give you weird dreams. I pretty religiously take magnesium before bed, but I feel like I just take some zinc to see what happens, you know. Right, here's one of my dreams anyway. So one of the dreams, I'm going to get back to some things in the chat, but one of the dreams that I had was right at the beginning of this. I had a dream, and for those of you who don't know, I've sold the house that I'm currently living in. Like I'm about to move out at the end of August, and I hadn't found a place to live as of yet. So many of my dreams seem to revolve around trying to buy a house or like trying to live somewhere and not particularly going well. So anyway, this is one of the only dreams that I've only got like 2 or 3 dreams. So one of them, I was looking for a house, literally couldn't find any. There was no houses for sale, and then the estate agent was like, "Have you tried looking in Italy?" And he sent me this like random house that was in this like Italian island somewhere, like by the sea. I was like, that looks like fun. So for some reason, I ended up flying out, and I was like on this island with nobody else, and we were looking at this house. And then it was like, you know, one of those things where you see in like a horror movie where the person like goes into a house and they'll be like, "Oh, the house is amazing, but there's a catch." And then the catch was like the next door house had sunk next to it, like it fell off the cliff, and the family was like never seen again. I don't know why this was happening in my dream. It was particularly just a bit odd. And then I was like, "Oh, I'd be interested to look around the house." And then for some reason, Brian Griffin, so you know the dog from Family Guy, like appeared. He was for some reason there and present, and he was like, "Oh, I'll go look for you." So like he chucked on his scuba diving gear, and then swam down, and then looked around the house, and then found some dead bodies, and that was when I woke up. So I mean, explain that one. I don't know. I think I was watching Family Guy before I went to sleep, which is probably why Brian Griffin appeared. But it was, yeah, that was one of the only dreams that I had during the last 6 weeks, and I was like, I mean, I'll write this one down, but I don't know what it means. That was my not so fun story. How about nightmares? Again, because I don't really dream, don't have nightmares, but I have had sleep paralysis once. I don't know if anyone watching, have you had sleep paralysis or that sort of feeling of being awake but being asleep at the same time in a nightmare sort of setting? Just took a nap and I dreamed again. I do not take naps. Not that I don't like naps. I just tend not to take naps because I don't need them. But I rate a good nap, but very, very unnecessary. The dead body is probably a sign of frustration, or perhaps the dead end or a stalemate. I don't know. It was particularly weird. That dream. I didn't really understand it. I had sleep paralysis maybe 3 times a week. Oh, that sounds actually horrible. Like, see, if you haven't had sleep paralysis, it is literally the worst. I had sleep paralysis and a demon started choking me in my sleep. Yeah, Ethan. So right, I had exactly the same thing, probably like a year ago, and I was lying in bed and like you're obviously asleep, but you feel awake, and it felt like something was literally like standing on my chest, and I couldn't breathe. And my girlfriend at the time, like, she was awake and could see me being asleep, and I was like half asleep, and I could feel myself like saying, "Help me," like help me in my sleep, because it felt like, yeah, I don't know, somebody was choking me or somebody was on top of me. And then I woke up and then just went back to sleep, but it was like really not a very fun experience. Certainly wouldn't recommend it. Somebody says yes, when they're stressed, they also get the sleep paralysis. Yeah, sleep paralysis is a really interesting one. Like the demon starting choking you. Like, I can't explain it, but that is the sensation that I got from that. And I'm not a religious person. I'm not the sort of person who would believe in angels and demons. And I had no understanding of sleep paralysis before that point. But the only way I could describe that experience was it felt like there was a demon choking me, which I can't explain. Like, that's the way it felt, with no sort of other pretenses to it. Yeah, dude, resting a hand on his chest, couldn't breathe. Yeah, it was very, that was a not a fun experience. Yeah, I mean, a great point. Don't analyze dreams without knowing the context is a fantastic point of the book. Do you know what? I kind of was a bit frustrated by the book, because I read it and I was like, a lot of other books that I've read with Jung, there's been like actually some practical advice in there, but I kind of felt like really he was just talking about the importance of dreams and the differentiation between like the primitive psyche, so our sort of what he would describe as, I think, sort of instincts and more emotions versus like the rational, which I think is a fairly fair observation. Like, if you think of it in a rational sense, we've got, is it the amygdala, which is the part of the brain, the sort of the reptilian part of the brain, and that's going to be more associated with that sort of primitive aspect, those primitive reactions. And then obviously through evolution we've ended up developing different parts of the brain, and then you've got sort of the bit that makes us human. What would they be called? I actually know what they'd be called. I'm talking out of my ass. I'm obviously no expert on neurology, but yeah, obviously like that bit is the more rational part, and it's like kind of fighting that balance between the two. I do have some questions for you, actually. There's some questions that I wrote behind. Okay, an interesting part I thought about this book was, so the analogy that he gave was the difference between animals and men. And he talks about like how animals have certain learnt behaviors, right? Like, I don't know, if you ever have a dog, like they just know how to do certain things. Like, they have those natural built-in instincts, obviously through evolution in their life, and it's handed down, I guess, genetically, that they just do certain things. And it almost appears that humans, I don't know whether that's culturally, but we seem to not necessarily have that. Like, we're walking, we're running, we do bits and pieces, but like there seems to be a lacking of that understanding of handed down things. And I understand that some of this is to do with the fact that humans obviously evolved language, so we could make we didn't have to pass things down through the same sort of process, and we could do it through education and talking and teaching each other. But I just thought it was kind of an interesting choice. Like, are we choosing to ignore certain parts of what we potentially could have been handed down? The right isn't working. Yeah, I'm aware. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to live streaming. I'm sorry, it's left only audio. Just love your left ear. And I'll try and figure it out. I'll figure it out for the next one. I've been having this anyway with the recording. I can't reach out. So, Paul, yeah, your audio is coming out of one side only. I'm sorry. Iron says most of my recent dreams I've had of me having sexual interactions. I feel like that's, I mean, probably something that people don't want to admit to, but definitely probably one of the more common dreams, I would have thought. And obviously, like, if you read anything about, I guess, Freud, like, I mean, he was renowned for making everything about sex, right? I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I had quite a few sexual dreams during this like 6 weeks of writing down dreams, and I was like, yeah, I'm probably gonna leave those ones out. I'm not gonna talk about those ones on the live stream. It's just a bit weird. But yeah, that's come. I don't think it's, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think it's one of those ones that sort of, because you'd associate that with like a bit more, I guess, immaturity and like even go in depth those dreams. No mate. That's what incognito's for. You don't need me to describe sexual dreams on a live stream. But yeah, I don't know. You'd have thought that's something that's like, I don't know, you grow out of, or through maturity changes, maybe. I just thought it was an interesting one. I have dreams every night for about a year and a half. I'm quite jealous, you know. I would love to dream more. I feel like I'm missing out on something. Right, let me have a think. I'm sure there were some points that I wanted to make. Oh yeah, process of orientation was one of them, which is the idea about thinking and feeling as opposed to being rational. I don't know how far behind this chat is, because I think I've been mentioning stuff and then like comments will come up like 5 minutes later. I'm pretty sure I've got this on like the lowest delay, but hey to people who are joining. Isn't it because of rationality? Like, animals don't have any consciousness, at least not to our degree. So the info from unconscious is clear, easier to get into the surface and influence more of the behavior. Would you? I don't know. I don't know if I think animals do have like a consciousness to some extent. Like, if you know, if you've ever had a pet or a dog or something, they for sure have a personality. Like, they have emotions. They're angry, or they're, you know, very loving, very chilled. Like, they have just as much of a personality as some people. Like, sometimes I feel like my dog can speak. If you look at him and then you say something to him, he'll look back at you and be like, I know what you mean, man. I know what you mean. So I don't know. I don't know if dogs don't have consciousness. They just don't have language, maybe. Because, you know, dogs dream as well. Like, it's fascinating. I don't know if you've ever like seen, you know, your dog, they'll be napping and then suddenly they'll be like running or barking in their sleep. Like, they're clearly dreaming about something. There's something there that's happening. Fascinating. Anyway. Any recommendations for frozen shoulder? Try to move it. Frozen shoulder, this is completely unrelated, but, you know, somebody's asked a question, so I'll try and reply. Frozen shoulder is kind of a weird one. Number one, go see a physio. Always the best shout. And number two is just try to, like, think about any movement is good movement when it comes to injuries. So, like, almost the worst thing you can do is just resting, because resting doesn't help with like movement of metabolites and things, and getting blood flow, osmosis into areas which don't get blood flow. So moving is good. And there's also a great book which is called Shoulder Pain: The Cure and the Solution. And the book is basically just talking about the benefits of hanging. So I'd give like various forms of hanging or brachiation a go and see how that feels. Maybe because people think before answering. It also takes longer to articulate yourself on topics like this. Man, I've been sat here like probably about an hour before this live stream, and I was like, what exactly am I going to talk about with this book? Because like there's so much that we could talk about, and also you're trying to describe things that don't necessarily make sense, but then you're trying to put it into a way that does make sense, and sometimes people need to experience these things for themselves. I think that's probably the key, and not necessarily that we get that opportunity. I read this book last year. It's great. A good introduction to symbolism. I think so. Okay, I've got one for you, right? So, and we talked about this very briefly at the beginning of the stream, but I feel like a few more people are here now. So I want to ask you a question, and I want to get your response on things, right? So, what do you make to people that would write this off? They would say, like, this book is woo-woo. This is not, maybe it's not real science. I think this is written around, like, I think that it was the turn of the century. I think it was from reading the book, I got the impression it was like 1920s. And so this sort of attitude, I think, is the attitude of what Jung and many people in this book describe as modern man, right? This hyper rational, hyper order sort of man. We've conquered nature. All of this stuff. This is woo woo. Like science explains everything. And then people have this same attitude when it comes to, say, religion. So for example, if you'd have spoken to me maybe like 7 or 8 years ago, I'd have been adamantly 1961. I apologize, I'm completely wrong. I'd have been adamantly like atheist. You know, if you'd have spoken to me, I was reading a lot about religious sort of stuff, and I was very much in the camp of like, religion's dumb. How could you believe something like that, etc. But I had this attitude. I'm not religious now. I'm still not religious. I wouldn't say I'm an atheist. I just say I don't really know. But I also don't feel the need for religion in my life. If that makes sense. Anyway, whole other topic. But I didn't really know. I hadn't had any experience of religion, and I think a lot of people, especially in like the scientific community, not necessarily scientific, just generally now, like there's a bit more of a sentiment against religion, and it stems from an idea of like, I don't know, maybe we don't need this. Maybe religion was like, I'm gonna have to Google whatever that is, David. Yeah. I'm trying to put into words something that is kind of hard to describe. But 2 seconds. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't know. People write off religion because I know we feel like we know so much about the earth, right? Or the world. Like we can pick up our phone, we can look on Google, and we can literally see the answer to pretty much anything. And I think maybe that gives us a false pretense that we know everything. And then you kind of write religion off. You're like, oh, well, what's religion trying to answer? And I think in this book they talk about like kind of that piece that is missing through kind of our writing off of I guess spirituality. But again, I don't like the word spirituality because I think it comes with too many sort of weirdly negative connotations, right? If you say spirituality to somebody, they think like, oh, woo woo, like sort of stuff. Whereas it's just not the case. It's just it's almost like it's trying to make meaning out of the world, and I don't think that science is necessarily the best way to provide that, or certainly give you like a really meaningful explanation. So I'm going to catch up with some of the comments that people have left now. Science knows that it doesn't know everything. If it would, it would stop. Yeah, and I love that as well. I think obviously like the principle of liberal science is like you should always be prepared to be wrong. You should always be prepared that the current theory is the best theory up until this point, and it's sort of constantly developing. But I think a lot of people will be like, oh, but this study said so, like it's fact, like it's written in stone. Like, yeah, if there is a study, if there's some literature on something, like, yeah, it's a good indication that this theory might be correct, but it's never like set in stone. It's never non-negotiable. Like that's the pretense of science, right? It's like that you could always be wrong. That should always be your first sort of approach to things. I don't think working out has anything to do with dreams. I had an experience that dreams come from your emotional place. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it comes from as Jung would say, dreams come from the subconscious, right? They come from things that aren't necessarily present in your conscious sort of living day to day. FOXP2 gene was found to be language gene in most animals, in bats, reptiles, and humans. I guess a form of expression is different. Origins are similar. How interesting. We share some genes, but through... Wow. I think I'm going to have to look that one up. I'm not going to talk about stream that because I have no idea what I'm talking about. Modern Man in Search of Soul. I have added that to the reading list as well. By the way, speaking of which, for the next one, we're going a little bit less like woo-woo. We're reading The Breathing Cure, which is by Patrick McKeown. Yeah, McKeown. Cool. We'll say McKeown. He wrote The Oxygen Advantage, which I think is that was a bestseller ultimately. A fantastic book. And the reason I actually got this is I am a dirty mouth breather. Like, I broke my nose when I was younger playing rugby and also playing basketball, so I broke it a couple of times. And I I can't breathe out of one side of my nose, but I have never been able to breathe well through my nose, and I know like mouth breathing is a problem, and how important like breathing is for many aspects of, obviously they got physical but also health as well. So I posted on Instagram, like I've started doing some mouth taping and some stuff to like help open my nose, and some other breathing exercises. I've started reading this book, and I was like, actually, this would be a cool one to go through together for like 6 weeks, and chat about at the end, and maybe go through, because this book is actually great for more application stuff. So there's some exercises and some things to try. So I thought it'd be a fun one to try with people on the stream. Like we could go through some exercises together and talk to us about that. But that is the first link, and one of the first links in the description. So there's that. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Back to the woo-woo. I don't think it's about rationality here, more about openness. A rational and open-minded person would take into consideration at least Jung's info rather than just debunking it. Absolutely. And I think like anyone who says like, oh, that's trash, I'm like, actually, have you read the book? Have you studied what that person has said? And like most of the time it's a no. Most of the time they've read their side of the argument, and then their side of the argument tells you that stuff is trash, but they've never like experienced the other side for themselves. And it gets harder as well with like with social media algorithms. You just get exposed to more and more of the same side of the argument, and yeah, you have to like actually go out of your way to start exposing yourself to the other side of the argument, which is painful. Some people say yoga is very Buddhist and praying. I feel nothing but pain. Yeah. So, well, if we go from the Buddhist teachings, then life is suffering, you know. That is the foundation of Buddhism. So maybe they are teaching you something. Have you read or listened to stuff by Christopher Hitchens? I recognize the name, but I haven't. No, maybe it's something I need to look into. Science tells us that facts about the world, but it doesn't provide us direction in subjective personal matters, such as the subconscious emotions or which we do to self-actualize. I mean, that for me is massive, and I think you can see that kind of as religion has got less prominent in the Western world. There is the rise of many other disciplines that are kind of filling that spiritual space. So one of the things that I found really fascinating, just about human evolution in general, but also like something that was highlighted in this book, is if you think about any civilization in human history, like no matter how disconnected that civilization is, there's always been some form of essentially religion, right? Maybe it's multiple gods, maybe it's the elevation of somebody in the tribe to that godlike level, but there's always been that step beyond our existence that we know there and then. And I find that fascinating because that is outside, you know, now it's like, okay, well, Christianity's been spread around the world, so has many other religions. But this is like independently of that, individual tribes, unassociated from each other, not even having possible ways of communicating, have come up with their own sort of versions of religion. And obviously that kind of indicates that there is that need for, I don't know, as you said, that self-actualization, that meaning more than just, you know, whatever's going on in life itself, the rational, the objective sort of reality. Do you read philosophy? I mean, I guess so. It's something that I'm particularly interested in, but part of me actually doing this book club was I wanted to read more. So I was like, if I put something out there that I want to read, and I do it as like a book club, it'll make me read it, which is, you know, why I did this in the first place. And it'll be cool to discuss these ideas. Like, it's just, I know this isn't going to be the most popular thing. This is not going to be the thing that's for everyone. Like, these book club ones always get way less views than everything else, but it's just something that I really enjoy chatting about. And like, most of all, I enjoy interacting with people in the chat and like actually chatting about things, more so than just, I mean, the standard conversation on the internet is just an argument, and it's like no side is going to give in. It's just both sides shouting their argument at each other. It's pointless, but this is kind of cool. It's just chill. Religion is a one of many possible glues for societies. Half-fair points that out quite nicely in *Sapiens*. *Sapiens* is in the book by, what was his name? Is it Yuval? Yuval Harari. Did he write *Sapiens*, or was that another guy? Actually, *Sapiens* and was it *Homo Deus*? AR, this is, you're only hearing it out of one side of your headphone. I'm sorry, I suck with technology. Apparently, I can't figure out why this is only one side. You're not hearing this wrong. Just use the side of the headphone that is working, please. And I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to actually do one of these book club episodes on *Sapiens* or *Homo Deus*, because that was, for me, I really loved that book. I just thought that was really interesting. I think as a human, you should understand like where humans came from. But obviously, like, it's such an old book now, and I feel like most people who have wanted to read it have read it. So I kind of skipped that one. But if anyone hasn't, definitely go and read that book. It's a really good book. Thank you for letting me know how you've got on with your front split and middle split routine. I'm glad it's helping. Like, that's kind of why I make videos on YouTube. So it's always great to hear. Love to hear it. Religion provides answers. Answers provide comfort. We're scared of the unknown. Science provides better answers now, but can't answer all the questions. But doesn't mean religion has the correct answers. Yeah, I mean, I would kind of agree with you there, Sophie. I think human beings, ultimately, we are afraid of what we don't know. But I think that's kind of natural. You usually fear what you don't know, and then once you understand it, maybe you feel less afraid. Oftentimes, actually, and even in this book, Jung talked about how people will move to religion as they get towards like their sort of as a role later in life. So as they get to the end of life, they start finding that requirement for explanation outside of life. Most young people are you're so unaware of the concept of dying that you don't consider the need for religion, I think, when you're younger, and it's something that as you age you start considering more. Certainly something I noticed, like when my granddad was dying from cancer. Like he was never really a religious person, but then certainly in like the last few months he started talking in more religious ways, which hopefully provided him some sort of salvation in that respect for like how he was feeling, because it's a horrible thing to know that you're going to die, but ultimately I guess we all are. That was kind of deep, bro. Let me go back. Let me read some of these. Just to make sense to me. Our knowledge is very limited. Perhaps a gods, beings who are watching over us, our experiences. Yeah, I don't know. I for me personally, just on a logical end of the spectrum, I'm like, I can't believe that there is somebody up there watching over all of humanity. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense in my head. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's beyond our understanding. But I think religion only works if you like truly believe in whatever it is that the religion that you're following. So for that fact, like the benefit that religion might give me just doesn't I don't know, because I don't believe that aspect of it. I don't think the other aspects really work. But there's I think there's many other ways to get that spiritual kind of fulfillment, feel that because obviously there's that missing element of the psyche that's needed, right? Doesn't have to come through religion. I feel like religion in the past, even for indigenous groups, was more about creating social, political understanding rather than spiritual. Yeah, I mean, you look at, I guess ultimately, like, religion is just telling stories. I know, like, Jung and many other more modern day psychologists have like drawn from even Disney movies, and obviously, like, you have the hero archetype and the story of the hero, which is present. Like, it's the most common story that's sort of told. Like, a lot of these religions about telling stories, they're about explaining things that happen in life in more simple terms, or making sense of life, I guess. Nietzsche on religion absolutely is like I love Nietzsche. I read Thus Spoke Zarathustra a long time ago, and I probably would benefit highly from rereading it. And certainly, if nobody has heard of Nietzsche or experienced some of Nietzsche's thoughts, again, I would highly recommend it. Also, Sophie, again, I love the fact that you point out religion and spirituality are not the same thing. It's true. I was saying it more in the sense that it filled the same, in my eyes anyway, it filled the same sort of part of the psyche, right? The part that you're looking for. I honestly think the decline of Christianity in the world is really dangerous. Ooh, I mean, I don't know what to say of that. I don't know. I don't know if specifically Christianity. I think certainly the departure from valuing any spiritual aspect of life and only focusing on the material, I don't think that does people benefit. As somebody else pointed out about the like science is good at giving answers, but not necessarily the answers. That self-actualization, that understanding of your purpose here, what you're doing, why you're here, making reason. I don't think materialism is a great solution to that. I don't necessarily know if Christianity has the answer. It had the answer at one point in history for sure for a lot of people. It still does now. But I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up with all these things. I'm just rambling now as well. It has actually this book, although like I read this book and I was like, it's interesting. Like I believe some of it, I like some of it, and some of it connected with me. But it more just made me consider like, am I missing out on some spiritual aspect in terms of my reading? Like as I said, I rarely read fiction. I pretty much always read nonfiction. I would consider myself way on the like rational sort of side of things in terms of just how I conduct my life. I guess maybe it gives me a lot of comfort being more rational, more logical about things. And I was like, am I missing out on like that spiritual thing? I would usually discard stuff if I considered it woo-woo, which is why this book I wanted to read it. I was like, it's kind of challenging what I would think usually. Of course, happy birthday. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Diru. I hope that's right. Happy birthday to you, mate. Hope you're doing well. Where did I get to? I know this is live, it's about books, but I have to ask any favorite movies. Do you know what? Right, okay. So I'm sorry, this is for Don't Care, Didn't Ask, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I've just finished watching the Matrix trilogy for the first time in like a decade, like a long time. That was the last time I watched the Matrix trilogy, and that was awesome. I really enjoyed that. And also, like, there were so many aspects of the Matrix trilogy that I was thinking, because I was watching it and I was reading this book at the same time, and I was like thinking about how many things kind of interlinked with some of the ideas that was being expressed in the book. But those of you who haven't watched the Matrix, like, or even if you haven't watched it in a long time, just watch it again. Like, there's so many good parts of that movie. Or, I mean, probably not the best trilogy though. Like Lord of the Rings, definitely God tier. The Matrix equals Plato's Cave. Yeah, I mean, essentially. But yeah, I just love that movie. It was great. I haven't watched it in a long time. There's my short story. Welcome. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Indeed, thinking that there is heaven after the life of God gives solace to those who are near the end of their lives or suffering. I think that was in relation to what I said about my granddad becoming more religious as he was sort of passing away due to cancer. But certainly, yeah. I mean, as I said, like, it's one of those things, like, if that gives you solace, then absolutely, like, believe in it. Nobody's going to tell you not to do that if it makes you feel good. You know, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, who cares? Truth does not need to be structured to find which religion does. Okay. I like that. Red pilled. Yes. Take the red pill. Matrix is fully based on that book. Yeah, I mean, as I said, like, I watched the Matrix. I just felt like watching it, and I was like reading it. I was like, this is so weird. Highly recommend it. If you're in that mindset, it's a good film to watch. Have you read books by Jordan Peterson? I have. I've read both his books. As I said at the beginning of the stream, like, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I think certainly about, personal responsibility, is a, you know, obviously it's like a crux of conservatism, but I think ultimately encouraging people that they can do good things is never a bad thing. Like, and they have control, or more control than they think of, about their own destiny, and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. I think is great. I don't understand how anyone can say that encouraging somebody to take responsibility of their life is a bad thing. Dostoevsky, yeah, I think I've heard Jordan Peterson mention that name. It's a Russian writer, if I'm correct in saying. Can you explain the archetype symbols subconscious ego subject to the book? Do you know what, Mary? I'm going to say that I probably can't. I'm not going to lie to you. I would love to be able to sit here and explain the archetype symbols, but they are much more complex than my understanding of the archetypes. As I said, like, I'm still kind of digesting a lot of the things in the book. Like, I feel like, you know, you could have multiple conversations about just even small fragments of this book. So I was just really like chatting in general about kind of people's experience of it, or just experience with like the subjects that Jung tackled in particular, which was like, I guess, I think I've said like about the relationship between us and spirituality, and the difference between like modern man being more rational and discounting the irrational, the unconscious, the natural side of things. So yeah, I can't answer your question, I'm sorry, but I would highly recommend the book. It was interesting. I have a friend that came back after 5 minutes of being totally dead. I asked if he saw a light. He answered it was pitch black, just nothing. Always thought, always what he thought, but I'm happy with people who believe. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's like, just because somebody died and then didn't see anything, that doesn't disprove it. Ultimately, these things, like, they're beyond the point of being able to prove. It's like, you either believe or you don't. If you believe, it's going to bring you value. If you don't believe, probably not. Like, just move on. Find something else, you know. In the handstand, my body is straight, but not in a straight line. How do I fix it? Probably your shoulders. This is just off topic, but yeah. Open your shoulders up more and everything else will fall into line. Can't build a good house off bad foundations. God does not watch humanity. God permeates throughout all humanity. In that way, humanity is watched by God. So would a way of interpreting that be, all humans have this, more spiritual element, I guess? Would that be God, the divine in the human? I don't actually know how. I need to read more into some Christianity sort of stuff. It's interesting, like, for sure. I'm not saying that it's something that I believe. I find those things fascinating because ultimately it's like people in the past trying to explain our existence on Earth. And it's just interesting. What are your views on ego? I think obviously like the dissolution of ego is ultimately, I guess, something that is like the core to many different spiritual practices, I guess. So there's got to be some value in it. But certainly I think ego also has some benefits as well. Like sometimes it people do things negatively for reasons related to the ego, but also some people create positive things for that sort of same motivation as such. So I don't know if I feel bad about ego. I think ego is just sort of like recognizing yourself. But certainly, yeah, like the common sort of the negative outcome that's associated with somebody being egotistical, I guess, would that be narcissistic? I don't know. It's just language at this point. But yeah. I certainly try to fact check myself sometimes. Actually, to be honest with you, YouTube comments are great because sometimes people can be so like I maybe get like, I don't know, 100 good comments and there'll be like one bad comment. And I will ignore the 100 good comments and I'll fixate on the one bad comment, for example. But like actually it's kind of a good thing because I just feel like I constantly get to like check myself. And it's, like, I think it's always useful to have that person in your life, and so, certainly YouTube comments seem to be like that person in my life sometimes. So it's good. I always love to hear, like, this is why I love this sort of chat. 'Cause I'm like, okay, if I'm going to think these things that I've sort of come to the conclusion of the book, I'll present it, see how you guys react, see what you say in sort of, and then go from there. Like, have a discourse about it. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just some kid chatting shit on the internet. The point is, you can't explain archetypes. It depends on the person and how they experience them. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one as well. Like, maybe again, this is myself being a little bit hyper rational. As I was reading this book and I was expecting like Jung to lay out like, oh, these are the archetypes. This is how you fit in, and that's like, again, that's me being logical and rational and trying to like make a logical rational, like make an explanation of something that I guess is going to be really hard to explain and be, you know, divide up into archetypes, because as you said, like, humans are so varied and different in many different ways that it would be impossible to do that. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate you sticking about, and so thanks for saying thanks for the stream. Have a good one. And yeah, I mean, with the house sale and everything, I'm sure I'll mention it in some videos and try and share some of that sort of stuff. But it's been a big worry on my head, but fortunately it's cleared up over the last couple of days, which is great. Okay, somebody here. For example, communism was the political system based on non-existence of God and declined into tyranny and had horrible consequences into societies that ran it, even for a relatively short while. I mean, as much as I'm interested in the conversation between like communism and our current political system, I don't think it's something that I want to necessarily go into on this stream. But yeah, I certainly think it is interesting. Like, I think, where is the spirit located in humans? Another good question. I don't know. What is the first book you ever read? The first book I ever read was, I didn't actually read it, but my mum read it to me, and that was, I mean, obviously, like, to be fair, right? Okay, this is a stupid thing to say, because of course you've been read like children's books. The first book I really remember was The Hobbit, which, again, fantastic book. God could be a metaphor for something like the collective soul, spark of life shared across all living beings. Yeah, I mean, that's how I would interpret when who said earlier about like God doesn't watch over people, but God is a part of everybody's sort of everyday actions, and in that way God watches over people. Like, I can see that, like, and how that sort of take on things would sort of be, I guess, like a universal principle for kind of spirituality, I guess. If that's a way of putting of it. I've heard recent lectures on human behavioral biology by Stanford professor. Do you know, somebody mentioned that in the last? I did a stream on Alan Watts, right? And that was the last book club we did. And somebody else mentioned like Alan Watts is not necessarily Alan Watts is a load of bullshit, but like, or I mentioned that I was going to do Jung in the next thing, and he was like, "Oh, that's a load of bullshit." And then somebody said like, "Oh, this is the only way. Human behavioral biology is the only way to explain psychology." And I was like, "Okay, well, fine, whatever." But I did watch a little bit of it, and it was interesting. But again, it's one of those things. It's like you're trying to be hyper rational about something that isn't rational. Ego pushes a person, I guess, kind of so that they stay on path. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, ego can be just as destructive as it can be to push. I think it depends on. So for me, it's like the reason the warrior is part of the bodyweight warrior, right? Is the warrior is to do with the warrior energy, which is the mature expression of a masculine energy sort of archetype, I guess, part of like Jung's philosophy. And as part of that, you have like the shadow elements of it. So you have the aspects of that energy that, you know, don't necessarily produce good outcomes. Like the warrior in its fullness is about striving towards things, being diligent with practice, putting in the time, the effort, the work, and doing things for the right reasons. But obviously, like, then you have the immature expression of that, the shadow expression of that, which is the opposite of that, right? So I think like ego, you could consider in the same way. You have like ego as a force for positive, where it might drive you to do things that are good, and then you have it as a sort of a force for negative as well. Recently, I'm having some knee pain, currently training for a marathon running, taking some days off. What kind of stretching will help? Does stretching improve joint health? to answer your question, the literature overwhelmingly supports strength training as the best way to mitigate and aid with injury recovery. So I wouldn't stretch injuries, I would work on strengthening them. That would be my recommendation to you. So do a little bit of strength training. A lot of people who do a lot of running would benefit massively from doing a little bit of strength work, just as a off conversation. What is the conclusion of the book? I don't think there is a conclusion that I could sum up here. I think that the book is a little bit of a journey for whoever reads it, because it's, as I said, it's a bit woo-woo. It doesn't necessarily have like concrete answers. A lot of it's down to like your own individual interpretation of things. Reading Jung would always be hard to explain. I cannot agree more. I usually when we got the live streams, we're doing the book club, and I'm like, oh, cool, I've got some points that I want to make because this kind of makes sense. And I had this, and I was like, sat with the book, and I was like, I've got some notes. I have literally no idea what I'm gonna say. It could be anything. Okay, I've got another question for you. So this is related to the book. And obviously in the book, they talk about like primitive cultures. And one of the aspects of primitive cultures was this idea of like initiations, this transition from being a man, or, example of being a boy, even going through some testing process, some initiation, and then out of the other side, you become a man. Obviously the same thing if you're a woman as well. Same shit. Doesn't really matter. You go from being a girl to being a woman. I don't, obviously, like a lot of people have talked about this, so we don't necessarily have this transition, this realization. I know I can't remember who I heard mention this, but somebody mentioned you can't mature until you have something else in life that's more important than yourself, which I thought was a great way to put things. But currently in life, especially with young people and children, people in school, we tend to prioritize intellectual development over, I guess, what you could call spiritual development. Do you think that there is a requirement for having, I don't know, some sort of initiation process, or some sort of like, how would you think that we could incorporate some form of spiritual development into our, children, I guess, children's lives? And it doesn't have to be in the form of religion or anything like that. I'm just like, so how can we, like, what is a way that could elicit the same sort of experience, that transition from going from a boy to a man, a girl to a woman, that maturing process? Because it seems that there's a little bit of lacking of mature decisions that happens in current culture. That was a thought that I had. I'm just like reading some notes that I had in the book. I thought I'd put that out there and see what you guys thought on that one. While you guys are having to think about that one, can definitely recommend Jung to Live By channel on YouTube. Okay, I'll definitely do some reading. Jung to Live By. Off topic, quick thank you for your work, general sort of stuff. Great to hear that it's been helping you and helping decrease the pain. That's fantastic. Great to hear. Can you talk a little bit about how women can fit in with the masculine warrior archetype, the bodyweight warrior philosophy? Does it equally apply, or are there differences? Okay, so yeah, the masculine, masculine and feminine in terms of psyche or attitude or energy, it doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with sex, right? You have yin and yang, which is like the masculine and the feminine, right? Yeah, yin, feminine, masculine, yang. So ultimately, like, the masculine energy and the feminine energy is going to be present in everyone, regardless of your sex. So really, like, I guess, because a lot of these are based in, this is one of those things that, like, I don't want to, it sounds sexist saying like some of the attributes that are, denoted to like masculine energy and female energy. But again, this is just like what I've read. But harnessing the masculine energy, yeah, you'll have, if you're a woman, you'll still be able to do that, right? It's part of that drive, that ambition. Whereas other aspects of your psyche might be more down to that female energy. It depends on how you want to split things up, or what labels you want to give them. Because this is just labels, just words at the end of the day. You know, I don't think it necessarily needs to be incorporated in. Like, if you want to get something done, you need to harness the warrior energy in the same way as, like, if you want to understand the sort of more spiritual aspects of things, maybe there's obviously the magician sort of side of things. There's an archetype, but then there's other aspects that you need to consider. Definitely one of his best books. Shame he is rarely even considered, usually mocked at university level. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some like intellectual sort of snobbery that goes on, but again, I think it lacks like, yeah, it lacks the rationale that is sort of put forward at university. That's that we talks about a lot. Modern man, we love rationality, we love explanation, we love order. We love to think that we've conquered nature. Develop spiritual development through deeper connection with the earth, light exposure while swimming. Do you know what, Rory? I think that's a fantastic point, actually. I certainly like, I think I mentioned this quite a bit on YouTube, but like around November, end of November in the UK, like obviously it was winter. We had another lockdown, like a really long lockdown in the UK. It was like 3 months. It was most people I spoke to in the UK like had a really hard time through sort of November, December, January, February. Like it was tough. And I know from like an emotional perspective that people suffered. And for me at that point, like I started just, the one thing I focused on was like, okay, first thing in the morning, I wasn't going to check my phone. I was going to get outside and then see some natural light, watch the sunrise, go do something. And I also started incorporating like more wild swimming, more like sea swimming through winter. And like both of those things, like I just instantly felt better. And I do think it's like that, I don't know, deeper connection with nature, or just like, I certainly, if I spend the whole day inside and don't have any connection at all with being outside, then I definitely feel worse for it. So I like that suggestion, being outside in nature. I think camping is just good for the soul. Like, it also comes down to a little bit of that like stoicism, right? I always remember Tim Ferriss talks about like a few days each month he would just go camping with like the bare essentials and some like cans of beans or something, just to remind himself like how lucky and how easy kind of life can be now in comparison to like what it could be. Yeah, I like that suggestion. That's really good. Learn spirituality, the arts. Fiction teaches empathy. Music ignites emotion. The arts are not valued enough in culture. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Even like I don't like, I know personally, like I see myself and I'm like, I can just, yeah, I would agree with that. I can see myself making that assumption on the arts, in terms of like drama and music and those sort of things. And I think as well, like music has taken a more rational approach. Like music is now kind of more about making money. I'm not saying for everyone, but certainly like a lot of people will get into music for the purpose of making money, I guess, rather than creating art or the thing they want to do. That's cool. I think as well, like if you're gonna embrace the arts in terms of like to play music, to act, you have to be, I don't know, very present, and also you have to be very non-judgmental of yourself as well. Because if you're trying to judge yourself too much when you're trying to learn to do something, you're just gonna like constantly be stepping on your toes. I've tried to learn to dance a few times and I'm terrible at it, and that was one of the hardest things. Like I'm always judging, like I always feel myself like judging what I'm doing and judging that it doesn't look good. Then it makes learning the thing harder, rather than like just trying to let go and kind of go with things. The masculine and the feminine, and not to be confused with male and female. Absolutely, that was kind of what I was trying to say, but I just butchered my way of saying it. Thank you for clarifying that one. We can all harness masculine and feminine energy despite being male and female. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Spiritual guidance will always be parents' responsibility first, community, then government. I mean, I don't disagree. I think so. I don't think that's can you imagine a government controlling spiritual development? Like it just there'd be so much outroar by anyone who sort of opposed that view. It would just be awful. Jung says that part of humans' journey to become complete. For males, they have to integrate the feminine into their masculine, and vice versa for women. Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I certainly think like I would think, to be fair, like that's kind of a push from, I guess, modern culture, is like that dissolution of sort of perceived sex values, I guess, if you want to call it, like the role of women versus the role of men. That's certainly becoming a little bit more watered down, but almost more to the point of like confusion as opposed to integrating into yourself. But yeah. There's a topic that I don't necessarily want to go into on this YouTube. We're an hour and 10 minutes in. I'm gonna kind of start to wrap things up a bit. But as I said, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like this is why I love doing these lives, man. It's just always have good chats with people, more so than you can have a chat with somebody on like a YouTube comment or something. Jung talks about integration starting around the age of 40. I mean, I can't deny, like, spirituality or that sort of aspect of understanding yourself. I think it's stupid to assume it's something that you're gonna get when you're like 18. It's the sort of thing that you can only do through kind of life experience. And you just need to get out there and do things and not judge it too much. Obviously not be stupid. Lockdown really helped me. For the first time in my life, I followed circadian rhythm and it helped a lot. Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. I got up at sunrise each day and I felt amazing for it. I completely agree. One of those things that is like, you're dealt a situation, and this is kind of the stoicism point, isn't it? It's like, it's not about what happens, it's like how you react and you respond to it. Like lockdown could have been a really bad time for me, but it ended up like initially being bad and then getting a lot better because of the sort of choices that I made, I guess. Appreciate the kind words, Philip. Thank you very much. Rory again, getting out in nature felt me more spiritually collected. Watching sunsets. Yeah, I mean, it's just in a really dumb way. Like, if you watch a sunset and you're like, damn, like, just thinking about what is occurring for that to happen is freaking cool, providing that you don't assume the world is flat. But I mean, even if you assume the world is flat, maybe sunsets are still fascinating to you. But I think it is a bit of a marvel to kind of watch. Why did you decide to go into Jung's work? As I said, it was actually one of the inspirations for the name Bodyweight Warrior. Warrior is one of Jung's archetypes. I just found it interesting, but like the actual the book itself was something that I knew would be a challenge to what I believed, which is why I read it. Thanks, Sophie, for all your insightful contributions as well. Thanks for the kind words, and thanks, Jesse and Ian as well. You've read on Stoicism. I think we've talked about Stoicism before on one of the book clubs. Yeah, massive fan as well. I think, again, like, Stoicism is like spirituality for people who are logical. Is how I would describe it. Like, it's rational spirituality. Would that be a fair way of putting Stoicism? I feel like it's potentially more than that, but that's kind of, yeah, it's kind of where I sat on things. If you think the world is flat, then you have a serious problem, mate. Oh man, that's the flat Earth comments. Honestly, just sometimes, just for enjoyment factors, I like to go and watch the flat Earth videos on YouTube. Like, it's just pure entertainment at this point. Anyway, on that note, maybe we should cut things off. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who joined and watched and joined in on the conversation. That's what these live streams are all about. I really enjoyed having the chat with all of you and reading what you had to say and kind of sharing my thoughts about what I've been reading over the past 6 weeks. If you want to join me on the next one, we're going to be reading The Breathing Cure, which looks like a big book, but I don't think it's particularly big. There's a lot in here to do with like actual exercises and practical applications, and I love me a practical application of in books. So, we can read into that, all about breathing mechanics, and we can stop being dirty mouth breathers together, because it's no fun doing it by yourself. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.